It is hard to pick the coolest features of Anime Studio Pro, but in my opinion, the brushes is one of those features. Let's take a look at this and see how they kind of play, and it's just amazing. Let's get going on it, but there's some do's and don'ts that we'll cover as we get into that. I'm going to grab the freehand tool, and we've been working with it across the movies. I want to highlight some changes I've made to it. I just engage the taper start and finish so it becomes thin and thick a little bit. And I'll also want to increase my brush width right here to something a little more substantial, like 15. The reason is that we'll be able to see more clearly how the brush tools play with this thick and thin availability. If you happen to be working with something like a Wacom tablet, a Bamboo or something like that, where you can control the width of the stroke by the pressure of the pen on the tablet, it's important to see how these things work as well, and it might totally change how you decide to draw and work with your program. So I'm going to create just a basic stroke. That's amazing, isn't it? And I'll go ahead and move this across and simplify it a little bit just so it's smoother for us. And that's nice, but that's all we need right here. Now you might think when you draw a line like this that you could immediately jump into the brush tool, which I'll do, and I'm going to select a basic brush. Now here's something to be aware of. When you click on a brush, you'll see it update in the preview window. If you do not see it update in your actual drawing area on your scene, then you haven't selected the brush. Get out of this immediately, because any changes you make to it right here will not be applied to the brush. The reason I bring that up is because working in Adobe Illustrator, if I see these points selected, I automatically assume that I can change how that stroke looks. Can't do that in Anime. You have to go ahead and come down to the Shape tool, then select the shape, then come back to where it says No Brush and click. I'll select again this very boring looking brush, but it will show us very clearly how this tool works. We did see it update in the window a little bit, but it's looking just fuzzy on the edge and not really anything too important. So let me show you how these features work in the context of this display that we see. The first one we'll take a look at is brush space. This brush here is a little piece of artwork, and the spacing is how close that artwork can be to itself when it gets reproduced along the line. Well, right now set at 0, it means this artwork can touch itself as it moves through the line, and we see that out here in our main drawing area. So if I increase this to something like 150, now this is getting spread out, and this allows us to look at some of the other features that come with the brush palette. The first one to take a look at is Align Brush with Curve. It's not enabled at this point, and so what happens is that the artwork, the way we see it up here in the brush settings, is reproducing exactly like that as it goes along the curve. By turning on Align with Brush, the artwork is rotated to remain in the same orientation as we see it here as it progresses across the many curves of the stroke that we made. So, one's not better than another, it's just a way to create some looks. Something else, brush jitter angle. These are all pretty regularly spaced, and while they go around a curve, there is a high degree of regularity that occurs with that as well. If we don't want it to be so predictable, then we can come over here and change it. Right now I'll change it to something like 90 degrees. This gives it a little bit more of a broken up look, which is fine. If I turn off Align Brush with Curve, it looks even more random. If we continue to increase this, you can do it all the way up to 360 degrees if you want. We see this nice little tumbling effect. Depends whether you're creating paths for ants or something like that. But let's look at how this applies to some of the other brushes we have available to work with. A great one happens to be this little vine brush. Now, this has been said, if we come down here and look, that it will align brush with the curve. That's perfect. No jitter. Brush spacing is left at 90, so it's even, it's just about the width of the artwork, but not quite. Which allows us to grow paths that vines could grow along. But watch what happens when I change the Align Brush with Curve. When I do that, they all stand up, just like the presentation we see here in the art. And now, instead of a vine, we could be having rows of corn or something in a field. So there's some cool ways to use these feature sets when you're working with it. You'll notice also that some of these are colored and some are black. Now, any that are black will pick up the character coloristics of the shape that you've got right here. Let me show you what I mean. We'll go ahead and choose OK. This is still selected right here. I'm going to come to Stroke and say, let's actually turn this into some corn, and click down to a dark green and choose OK. So if I select off this object now, we've got what looks like a whole bunch of hand-drawn strokes. We really just applied it with a couple clicks. Pretty nice. We come back into the brush palette using again the Shape Select tool. We can go ahead and make any modification. If we grab something like stars, this doesn't work as well because the shape doesn't bend, but if you had straight lines, this would be something really easy to work with. Oh, look, it's a nice little romantic scene here. We can throw some notes in, all sorts of cool stuff to work with, and it's just a huge time saver. A lot of these will give you a natural media effect. That is, like you actually sketched it out. And it's a nice way to control mathematically very precise movements using the points and lines, but you get this great natural media look as you work with these different shapes. So know that that ability is there and that you can customize these. You can in fact create some of your own new brushes if you would like to, and you can consult the documentation on Anime Studio Pro for that. But there is an introduction into working with brushes. Black ones pick up whatever color you have selected. You can change the amount of jitter they have, how far apart they are being spaced. We can change here, we didn't look at it, but the minimize frame to frame randomness. You don't want your animation necessarily looking like it's vibrating in place when you do an animation, but you might. And if you want to minimize that vibration, you can enable this feature right here. A really cool set of tools. I know you're going to love playing with it.